Welcome everyone to another episode of Mind Your Soul. And today's episode is going to be about the gut brain. What role does it play in our mental well being? And yeah, basically the part of nutrition in our daily lives. And we all eat. So I think it's very relevant to have this episode today with Zip, who is a nutritional consultant. Welcome, Zip. And he's now studying it even further, doing a PhD in longevity. But I think, Zip, you can introduce yourself to the listeners. Yeah, about your background, what you're doing today. Yeah.
Sure thing. So I had a heavy background in nutrition specifically. I worked as a nutritional consultant, as a health trainer within the NHS, that's the health service here in the UK. And over the last 10 years, my interest has diversified a little bit beyond nutrition. I've been paying initially a keen interest in both my family and myself, our longevity, helping us live for as long as we can in the best possible health. And have developed that further now to the company IS Wellness, where we'll be opening a clinic this year, and I do one-to-one consultations. Now, my focus is as a whole on longevity, but nutrition plays such a key role within that, that this talk today, which I'm really excited to do, thank you for inviting me, is
Yeah, I love your content. So I had to have you on.
thanks. And yours as well. It's great seeing your stuff every day. It provides like a real positive uplift and a reminder about some of the benefits that we can have of positive mental outlook.
Yeah. Thank you, Zip. You're here today because all of your content on Instagram, I've been following you for a while. It's very inspiring. And this is something I'm not an expert in. Like I always know, like we have to eat something our gut likes. We have to have lots of greens and stuff. But like, how important is this actually? Like, how does our gut health influence our brain function? And does mental health? It's a broad question, I know, but yeah.
Yes, it's quite a broad one, and the kind of possibilities on it are seemingly endless. The amount of research that's continuing to be published showing the impact of what we eat on our brain health and our mental well-being is huge. I mean, for me, there's probably the two biggest levers to impact our mental health and our overall cognition, probably through exercise. But I still believe that nutrition, as out of the two, plays a role. So there's so many ways in which they're interconnected, and one affects the other. So it's, being able to be aware of the ways in which we can optimize our gut health to optimize our brain health, and also similarly the other way around, because there's big research showing that the impacts of stress and other forms of negative mental health might have on our gut too. So it's, it's vice versa. One can help the other, and they can act in a positive or negative loop.
But how do we know how to eat right? Like, what is gut health? Like, what is like the right nutrition for our gut health? Maybe that's more like phrased better.
Yeah. So again, quite a broad question, but a very, very useful one. I think there's a few avenues to consider when we're talking about gut health. We have our gut, as in our small intestine and their physiology. And then we
Mhm.
have the microbiome, which inhabits our gut, which plays a huge role in our gut health and also in our brain health too. I think if we're looking at in terms of what foods are best to be eaten for that, we'd want to include things like some prebiotic foods. These are fiber-rich foods, soluble fibers. Lentils are a great one. They're really supportive of an optimal gut microbiome. This is the foods that feed our bacteria in our stomach, in our gut, in the optimum way. And so we want to ensure that we have a really good diversity of the healthy gut bacteria and avoid the buildup of bad bacteria. This is a system known as dysbiosis. So we really want to avoid this dysbiosis, which is when the bad bacteria are unable to overpopulate our gut, which leads to downstream consequences. So that's why prebiotic foods are a great one to include in your diet, things to enhance the good bacteria. As I mentioned, lentils are a good source. You've got artichokes, you've got a really wide range of them. One that I use as a supplement in smoothie that I have is a catcher fiber, otherwise known as gum arabic, as people know by that name. This has been shown to have a really strong promoting effect on those positive gut bacteria. And there is so many prebiotic foods though. In general, fruits, vegetables are a great source of prebiotics, the foods that our good bacteria need. So getting some of those in the diet is really important. In addition to that, having some probiotic foods. So I'm not so much for probiotic supplements as a whole. I think there's a lot of issues with them, and in terms of what you're actually getting from them is difficult to determine. But probiotic foods are foods that contain good bacteria that can help populate the good bacteria in our gut. You know, things like yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi. These are all really good examples of foods that contain healthy strains of bacteria. So when we eat them, those bacteria, some of them obviously die in the stomach, but some pass through into our gut, and they then help the population of these good bacteria. Like the lactobacillus strain is a great one for that, which is found in quite high proportions in some of the things like yogurt and kefir, which has been shown to have a really promoting effect on our brain health too. So prebiotics, probiotics, they're some of the good ways in which we can optimize our gut health. And then we want to avoid things which are going to impact negatively. So things like really high fat diets have been shown to promote an overgrowth of negative bacteria. And things like a high sugar diet as well have also been shown to have that similar effect, creating this dysbiosis. Again, that's the imbalance between the good and the bad bacteria. So avoiding those kind of excessive diets one way or the other is a great way to ensure that we don't have a growth of these bad bacteria. Now, this is really important overall for our health, because what we call gram-negative bacteria, these are a specific category of bacteria which have a compound called LPS, lipopolysaccharide, outer cell wall. Now, what happens with these gram-negative bacteria, which can be fed through high-fat diets, also high-sugar diets, is they then grow and they overgrow. As they overgrow, those bacteria start to turn over and die. As they die, the cells break down. This then releases LPS, which is toxic to us. It then passes through the tight junctions on the epithelial cells in our small intestine, getting into the bloodstream. It then hits the liver. When it hits the liver, it starts to promote inflammation and activation of immune cells, which promotes just a general state of overall inflammation. And the impact on the brain.
That is not good.
No, it's definitely something that we want to avoid. And yeah, that you might have otherwise heard by LPS as the term endotoxin. Some people have heard of it as that name, but in essence, this is what it is. It's toxic bacteria that, when they die, gets released into our bloodstream and has a range of negative downstream consequences. The link with the brain is also quite significant too, as LPS promotes inflammation, and we end up with neuroinflammation, and we also have this activation of our immune cells. And as you know, Farah, that hyperactivation of the immune cells in our brain, in particular the microglia, has been shown to be linked to a range of negative mental health issues, even things like depression, anxiety. On the shorter term scale,
I was coming to that actually. How is it so fascinating, right? How is so interesting, like how we eat, or yeah, actually everything what we intake in our body affects our mental health in the brain. So yeah, just like you were saying, keep on going. I just think it's very interesting how that actually affects our mental health if we have a very bad diet, like anxiety levels are high, and yeah, keep going on. I think it was very interesting. Yeah.
So there's a range of ways in which that can happen, but yeah, so with the LPS in general, it's increasing the activation of our immune cells. And it's been shown recently that we used to think that the brain was what was called a privileged site. So the immune cells in the brain stay within the brain and they don't exit or leave. But it's now been shown that's not actually the case, which is then why systemic inflammation in our body, which can be caused by the LPS, but also by a few other things, which we can get into a bit later on, can contribute towards neuroinflammation. And that neuroinflammation has a big impact overall on our mental health. Yeah, like I said, been linked to some of those short-term issues, which can obviously progress to long-term as well, depression, anxiety.
It's always affecting the memory, the hippocampus area. Yeah.
Big, yeah. So that was one thing that I was going to lead on to with the hippocampus, because those molecules specifically have been shown to have a negative impact on the hippocampus. That whole idea of gut dysbiosis that I was mentioning, it's been shown to really impact the hippocampus in a negative way, because the gut-brain axis is linked quite significantly through the emotional and the cognitive centers of the brain. So you've got things like the amygdala and hippocampus too. On the flip side of it, when we get things right with prebiotic and probiotic foods, one in particular is resistant starches, which kind of come within the category of prebiotic foods. These are starches that we don't digest, but then feed our bacteria. Our bacteria then produce what's called short chain fatty acids as a result of that. And these are kind of molecules that are used for energy, but they also send positive signals to the brain too. So when we get it right, we see things like increased levels of BDNF in the brain, which then supports the growth of existing neurons in the hippocampus and even potentially neurogenesis too, you know, the encouragement of the development of new brain cells, when we get it right, that is.
Yeah, when we get it right. So I feel like this is like, I don't know, a Western problem. Like everybody's struggling with nutrition. Or is it just me? I feel like this is a topic we all talk about. Like, oh, like my stomach is hurting, I'm bloated, and or something like that. I'm feeling off, and we always feel heavy if we have junk food. Like I don't have it that often, but sometimes I do. And I'm actually off the next day because I'm not used to it. It's the same with desi food, even though I have Indian, Pakistani background. I don't eat it. I eat it like once a month when I'm visiting my parents. And then my body is off. I'm like 3 days. It's like I'm heavy and my body is reacting. My gut is reacting. It's like I'm not
Yeah,
used to it because I eat so healthy. I'm not used to it. So I'm like, wow, imagine those people eating this every day. Like, right?
yeah, absolutely. I'm really with you with that one, and it's an unusual way that works. You know, the more that you tweak up and get your diet better and better, then you notice so much more when you have those
I'm so sensitive.
instances.
I cannot eat
Yeah,
like outside of my diet. And when I'm traveling, same problem. Like because I have like, yeah, I eat very healthy and very varied. And I do like a shake in the morning with raw eggs in it. I'm like, yeah. So that's good. Yeah, with oats and bananas and fruit. This is my breakfast on the go because I'm very busy with 3 kids. So I don't have time to do breakfast. So I take it on the go, dropping them off and stuff. But I'm like full for like 4 hours because it has raw eggs in it, some oats in it, banana, all kinds of things like that. So when I'm
mhm.
off my diet, traveling, doing other food, it's like my body shuts off because I'm so in my
Yeah.
routine. And then I'm struggling. Like, what's happening? I'm trying to eat healthy, even though I'm eating veggies in that country. It's like my routine is off and my gut is acting. Have you experienced this? Like the connection between that because I'm in my element, I'm doing my thing, but when I'm off my element, even though I'm trying, it's not the same.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, firstly, when you think of the body as a whole, it likes to work in a rhythm with our, circadian rhythm as a whole, controlling our day-to-day kind of sleep-wake cycle, but also our digestive tract as well. All of that kind
Exactly.
of
The
thing is about
digestion, that
timing.
was the word I was looking for. Yes. It just changes.
It does, yeah. And so, our gut bacteria are a result primarily of the food that we're feeding them. We feed them good foods, we get the growth of the good bacteria. And our body and our digestive tract knows then how to respond to the signals that it gets from those bacteria and the other signals which it produces within itself. Because, you've got the brain sending messages to the gut and vice versa, the gut back to the brain. And this involves a kind of really intricate interplay of different hormones. You've got serotonin, you've got GABA, you've got acetylcholine. They're all kind of playing a role within this, both signaling from the brain to the gut and vice versa. So our body likes to work in a rhythm with most things. And, typically, as you mentioned with your diet as well, mine's actually pretty similar, but we do the similar thing day in, day out normally. And our
Yeah.
body knows how to react, it knows how to respond. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when we, if we're traveling or, go see family or something like that, we're giving it something new. Firstly, then it's a different experience for inside the body. Our body's initially going to be prepared perhaps to be delivering a greater amount of enzymes to digest the food that we're normally giving it, not necessarily these new foods that are coming in. So there's that there. Secondly, our cells within our small intestine are adapted normally to the food that we're giving them. So when we're giving them different foods, the absorption rates are going to be slightly lower. But also, most importantly, I think relating to what you're saying there is the fact that the gut bacteria themselves the strains that we have in our gut are optimized for the foods that we're giving them. So when we're giving them something new, then we have these other symptoms as a result of that, things that we're not usually experiencing, bloating, excess gas, those kind of things that come along with it, because then we're putting something different in there, and the response that the bacteria give is different to what we're normally used to. And that's why we get that kind of uncomfortable feeling. Combined with that then is kind of the issues of the food quality when we're doing those sorts of things, like the likelihood that it's more processed foods that we're eating, greater inclusion of seed oils, perhaps reduced fiber. Then you start to see the transit time through the gut start to decrease, and some of those other symptoms start to compound. And I get exactly the same as well. I go see my grandma in London, more traditional style food, and I can feel it for a couple of days afterwards. And if I
Yeah,
go,
it's like I have to get back. I need like a week to get back to myself. It's like my body is so heavy and reacting to the food, It's crazy. Yeah, and I love it and I enjoy it, but then I have to like pay a price for it,
yeah.
after.
Yeah, and then so the thing is with that is then, like you alluded to there, is for us we can see that impact, and if we've got a good diet, 80%, 90% of the time, I think we're going to alleviate ourselves from the majority of the issues. The problem in society as a whole is the fact that people are there eating those kind of foods and diet 90, 100% of the time, and the healthy foods are such a small proponent of it. And that's then when it starts to play a big impact on overall health, mental well-being as well in particular, because day in, day out, continued exposure that we get to those foods, the greater inflammation that they cause, the activation of our immune cells, even the signaling effects that they have within the gut itself. Like I mentioned, we've got that connection with the gut and the brain. The brain signals, and the vagal nerve is one of the predominant nerves that populate the enteric nervous system. It's the nervous system of the gut. It's also through the autonomic nervous system and through the HPA axis too. But these innovations to the gut then promote the release of different hormones from endocrine cells within our gut. These are cells that produce hormones. Now, the gut bacteria, through the metabolites they produce, also have the potential to impact the hormones that are released from these cells. So when we're eating foods, then our gut bacteria can respond in a certain way, and this can influence the release of hormones within there. You've got things like serotonin in there, directly linked to our mental well-being, which is a big one. And then, if you're getting those continuous negative signals, it forms a strong impact then with the response that we're getting through our central nervous system as a result of that, because that then detects those, picks up those signals and feeds it back up to the brain, back to the hippocampus, back to the amygdala and the other areas where it's innervated from those pathways.
Yeah, and then we have these mood disorders. That's what I was referring to earlier when I said about junk food and stuff. It's like I'm like off the next day. Like I'm not me. I'm not fresh. I'm not bright. I'm not light. I'm like heavy and I'm tired. I'm snapping. So it does affect like everything like we're putting in. This is something I talk about a lot, but I mean like also what you take in as content or whatever, everything you're feeding your brain or your body through your mouth, whatever it is, like the mind body connection. It's like it's very important because it does affect our mental health.
100%, yeah, it really
Yeah.
does. You can see such a strong as well when you start to alter some of those dietary components. I mean, people who are eating off largely junk food, and 90% of the food is food that you classify as bad. Well, no need to this, it is legitimately bad.
It is
Then,
bad for us. Sometimes we crave it, right? So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you've got to have an allowance in there sometimes, because there's a lot of joy to be had from food as well. But if you are within that kind of spectrum of eating where that food occupies 90% of your diet, there's such a strong link with all sorts of mental health conditions and depression. I mean, there was a study that came out just fairly recently as well, discussing the impact of ultra processed foods on rates of depression, and you can see a really strong correlation with that. Yeah, it's a big one. And then when people are having that kind of diet and they're experiencing poor mental health and either low self-esteem, depression, anxiety, any of those kind of symptoms. And then they've got the motivation too, and the encouragement to start to change their diet towards a healthier, whole foods-based diet. Massive impacts on mental health and well-being, and also on brain performance too. There's so many compounds within food that we eat that have a strongly promoting effect on our overall cognition and neurogenesis too. It's a really key way to optimize our brain.
Yeah, about the cognition part, that is very important. Like we feed it correctly because, yeah, if we're having those heavy food or foods that are not beneficial for our brain for the long term, it will affect your cognitive performance. And like we talked about, also the hippocampus area, like things do deteriorate in your brain. Right?
Is a
So
big one.
everything will
Yeah.
kind of fall apart. Like you're not sharpening it. You're doing the opposite. You're kind of placing a bomb that is slowly like ticking, and later on it will explode, right? And you will get diseases in your body as well. Like it's not. Yeah, so many things will go wrong, and people don't always consider like what's happening in the brain. They just look at their body or their physical pain, and then they're like, okay, I have this, I have that, but it's like the correlation between, right? And people struggle with not being able to, yeah, digest food, and because they don't know how to eat right, and yeah, they're having so many problems, inflammatory
Yeah.
problems. Yeah.
That's kind of, I think, where a significant part of the root cause lays, in that inflammation. And like you said, with the
Yeah,
brain is something that we often don't pay attention to because we don't see it. We don't feel it as
exactly.
quickly as we do like some of the immediate symptoms of eating bad food. But when we look at things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in the long term, those things have been building up for 30, 40 years plus, in a similar way to, with heart disease, atherosclerosis. It doesn't just happen when we're 50, 60, 70. We get the end result when we're that age, perhaps, if we have a poor diet, but they build up over a period of time as a result of the environment that we place within our body. That's why then trying to optimize how we're creating that environment through our nutrition is such an important thing to do. And going back to the neuroinflammation that I was mentioning earlier on, it's been shown that high levels of L in our bloodstream and inflammation as a whole, and some of the different peptides and other chemicals produced by our bacteria, if it's in a bad sense, that can disrupt the blood-brain barrier itself, creating greater permeability and the greater likelihood of other compounds that we don't want to enter our brain getting into there as well. There's a really strong link with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease as a result of some of these factors too. So, recognizing what that is and then thinking, in the long term, I really want to protect my brain. That's probably the last thing that I would want to have happen,
So
is that
afraid of
mental
those
decline.
diseases. I'm like that's like the worst thing that could happen to me. Like this is what
Yeah.
I feel like. I don't want that. Like so I'm trying like and you're doing the PhD in longevity, and there are so many ways to actually increase longevity, and yeah, so like I would love to reach your paper when it's done and stuff, because I want to know more about this, how can we not get Alzheimer's or Parkinson. But is it not genetically? It's proven now, right? It's not genetically anymore. Um,
There was definitely a genetic component to it. I mean, with Alzheimer's specifically, and also with Parkinson's too, some of the issues with them. But Alzheimer's, the big one, is the ApoE4 genotype, which is something that you can get tested for really easily. I mean, even some of the simple tests like 24, they test for this. And
do that.
uh, yeah, if you've got 2 copies of that ApoE4 genotype, it does quite strongly predispose you towards the likelihood for developing Alzheimer's. But again, it's all about the predisposition and the likelihood from it. So it's one of those things where if you know you've got that genotype, then you definitely want to take more significant preventative measures to ensure that you're doing all that you can to optimize brain health. But as a whole, in general, with these things, I think you'd largely say it's much more of a greater impact is the lifestyle choices. They do different twin studies, and then I think for a lot of issues, though, not specifically these two, you'd say that typically 20 to 30% of our genes control our overall longevity or have the impact on longevity. And there's other studies that show that out of that, 20 to 30%, we have the power within our lifestyle, even if we have the kind of genes that aren't promoting longevity, to control more than 60% of that through effective lifestyle optimization, of which nutrition is a big one. But I think something we really want to be conscious of for our brain as we age, and I think it's going to become a lot more public knowledge over the next few years, and a lot more research coming out about it, is this issue of neuroinflammation and the hyperactivated microglia. There's significant evidence there showing that the increased activation of microglia, which are the immune cells, or some of the immune cells within our brain, they can contribute directly towards Alzheimer's pathology. This is about increasing the deposition of amyloid beta protein, which is the kind of main protein associated with Alzheimer's disease pathology, and also decrease in the clearance of it too. So having that really at mind, inflammation as a whole, and doing whatever we can to reduce inflammation, is one of the biggest factors I think that we can have on our overall longevity, and even more particularly on our brain health too.
Yeah. Thank you for all of this. So if people want to improve their diet, or is there any recommendation you can give them? Like if they listening to us and they're like, okay, I already eat healthy, but I could eat healthier, or I want to start doing this so I can get a better mental health and better gut health. Where should they start? Like you all mentioned the probiotics, but what should they start with? Like having kefir every day, yogurt, fibers, where should they start?
There's a lot to it. I mean, I would say as a start, for me, and also in terms of the literature out there as well, everything is interlinked. So we can come into diet just very shortly because there's a few more specifics in there, but exercise has been shown to impact our microbiome and our well-being in a cycle. So including more movement into our life is a great way to go. 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise is a great starting point, and that can be something like jogging as an easy to access route. So increasing our movement, optimizing our sleep, because our sleep also has a big impact on our gut microbiome and our mental health. Between 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night seems to be the sweet spot for most people. Avoiding excessive toxin exposure. One key area of this that relates to what we're talking about with the gut microbiome is glyphosate. Glyphosate is like the most commonly used pesticide in the world. You've probably heard of it by its name, Roundup. It's sprayed on a lot of produce. It's even actually found, unfortunately, on some organic produce too. But if you're going to buy foods, choose organic, so it doesn't have those pesticides. That doesn't have a negative impact on our microbiome, because this is a pesticide that's sprayed onto the food to kill pests. Obviously, our gut bacteria are also affected by it in the same way. So if we have high exposure to a lot of these pesticides, it really impacts our health there. Now, in terms of a general picture, it's just about healthy eating patterns. So I think reducing our consumption of those ultra processed foods, anything that when you look on the ingredients list, it kind of reads like a book. Ideally, foods that have no ingredient on are the best, single ingredient things like a fruit or a vegetable, but minimally so if we do have them. Increasing our intake of fruit and vegetables is a great way to increase that fiber and to increase the vitamins, minerals, and the other phytochemicals. There's something we haven't really touched on today is the polyphenol content of fruit itself, which has been shown to have such a promising effect on both our mental health and our gut microbiome too. So plenty of fruit and veg, that will go a long way.
And lots
Just
of
keeping
water,
food.
right?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Water is a really big one, and making sure it's a good quality source water too as well, because water can often be hiding a lot of things that aren't so great for us too. But definitely plenty of hydration throughout the day. Now, overall, it's interesting that I think out of the most commonly, the Mediterranean diet commonly tops the poll as the diet that has the most beneficial effects, both on our longevity, but also on our health and well-being too. And if we look into that, then you can see different aspects of it that relate to some of the stuff that we were talking about there. Fruit, vegetables, whole foods, reduced amounts of processed foods. But a big one as well, whether that's through food or through supplementation, is omega-3. So omega-3 can be found in the oily fish, salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, herrings, also in plant-based sources like walnuts and flax seeds too. And omega-3 plays a huge role in our brain health, in particular DHA, which is one of the omega-3 fatty acids, is really essential for optimizing brain health. So getting some omega-3 in the diet is a great one. And the other one is vitamin D, which we can get from getting outside into the sun as much as we can do. Also supplementing it if we need to. Me and your father have
I
spoken
take
about
the
before.
supplement because I live in Denmark. Like we have
Yeah,
sun
yeah.
very limited amount of time, So
Yeah, and I think me and you spoke about it once before as well, the need for us with Asian or African heritage living in areas outside of our
we
ancestral
need it
homeland.
extra. Yeah.
Absolutely. So getting some of those nutrients into the diet as well. I mentioned, omega-3, polyphenols from fruits, and then vitamins, vitamin D as well. Vitamin E has also been shown to be really effective for optimizing our brain health. And there's another class, kind of category of compounds called the sirtuins. The sirtuins are a family of proteins which are responsible for DNA repair, amongst other things, but have also been shown to have a really promising effect on brain health too. So things like resveratrol, which you may have heard from probably a decade or so ago, where people were promoting red wine as being beneficial for our health. It's kind of a bit inaccurate because the amount of red wine you'd need to be drinking was ridiculous. But resveratrol is an activator of these sirtuins. Similarly, pterostilbene is, which is found in blueberries. And there's another one called quercetin as well, which all these three compounds activate these sirtuins, which can have a really strong promoting effect on our brain health and mental well-being too. So including some of those things alongside a whole foods diet, getting plenty of sunlight, optimizing activity and sleep is quite a broad kind of lifestyle to be doing, but each one of those
But it's a
things all
lifestyle,
can.
basically. Yeah, it's a
It
lifestyle,
is,
right?
yeah,
Because now it's like, okay, we should buy all those supplements or things, It's like, but I think, yeah, you're very detail oriented, which is fine. But it's like, yeah, people need to get enough sleep because people do gain weight and their gut gets affected by stress. So again, it's all correlated, right? It's like a round circle, like repeating itself. We do need to move our body. That's why I do the neuro walks, right?
yeah.
Between sessions and podcasts, and this is my break. I live in front of a forest, so I'm very blessed with that. It's very easy for
That's
me to do those walks. Yeah,
that's
it's
that's
very
that's the
easy
big
for
one. I
me.
mean, getting
Yeah,
outside is the one thing, but if we have the capacity to do it in the sun is a second benefit. And if we can do it surrounded by nature, even better. There's so much studies showing that the
yeah,
diversity of nature that we can be in when we get outside, birds singing, the different species of trees, water
absolutely.
exposure, they all add up to just general improvements in our overall mental health and well-being. So,
Exactly. And
yeah.
then if you eat right, then you'll be like on a sky, like me, flying. No, I'm just joking. I'm joking.
Absolutely, yeah. That's
No,
it.
I'm also improving my diet. Like I've been working too much. So I've actually gained weight, but I'm like, okay, why has this happened? I've been sleeping less, I've been working more, and I have a desk job, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna change this. No, more breaks, sleeping more. So I was actually in a contest where we had to put our phones away at 10. And if we didn't do it, like for 2 weeks, and if we didn't do it, we would be fined like $25 a day. And I kept it and
Wow.
we're done with it. Yeah, and I'm still doing it because I wake up at 5. So of course I have to sleep, I mean at 10.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I kind of go to bed like 11 or to like midnight because then I'm broken the next day, right? And then you gain weight as well. And you
Yeah.
perform like less and all of it. So sleep, I would say, is number one actually.
Mhm.
But of course also eating the right things. So I noticed when I was tired, I was going towards the sugary foods. So I noticed that in myself. I was craving more sugar because I was low on energy. But that is like you have that sugar and it hits you, but then you're low again, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a big one. Actually, interesting. I just finished recording a longer form out on YouTube talking about that link between sleep and weight gain, and stress and weight gain too. And when we have a decrease in sleep, even just for the single night, has a huge impact on our blood sugar regulation for the following day, creating a greater likelihood that we're going to be seeking out foods that are higher sugar too. Has an impact on cortisol too, and all these things kind of round off to make us more likely to choose negative foods, just even from a few hours of disrupted sleep. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, the sleep is a really key one of that, and making sure that we're getting enough plays a big role. Often we short ourselves on it, thinking, oh, get an extra couple of hours out of the day, and then the next day
No,
we
you
lose
kill
5 hours
yourself.
because
Yeah, no. So I learned that the hard way, and I'm like, I'm changing. So I'm also in the process. Not like, even though I eat healthy and all, and I'm aware of everything, but the doctor needs a doctor too, right? So,
yeah, yeah.
so, yeah. So I'm in it too. Like, and yeah, and I thought this was a really interesting conversation. Like how it is so important to pay attention to what we intake, how we live, basically our lifestyle, basically. It's so
It
so
is.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah,
Thank you
like
for
you,
coming on, Zip. Any last thing you want to say? Like, where can people find you if they want to get in contact with you? And you're opening the clinic as well. Where you're located? And yeah.
yeah, to Milton Keynes. We'll be opening the clinic in the next 6 months, which is a lifestyle optimization clinic featuring a range of different services. I'm on Instagram here at IS Wellness UK, doing one-to-one coaching, a little bit in between time at the moment. It's not something I'm pushing too heavily. We've got our YouTube channel where we putting out regular longer form videos too in some of these similar areas, focusing on those key pillars of health. So we've got sleep, movement, diet, stress, and toxin exposure. So yeah, if you're interested in learning more about any of those topics, please give us a follow and like. And thank you so much for bringing me on today. I've been really looking forward to meeting you more and having this discussion. Sorry it took a couple of weeks extra on my end too, but
No
really great.
worries. You're so busy. You're doing so much. So I think that's amazing. And your father too, and you have kids and you're married. I think that's amazing, like juggling all of this. But I guess when you have your lifestyle in place, you can juggle more actually than the
You do,
average if
yeah.
you're struggling
Yeah.
with some things. So yeah, I think you're an inspiration. Thank you for coming on. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.